this is just craven and contemptible surrender to, I'm afraid, the ideology being pushed by our government. It seeks to erase our history and anything we need to be proud of. I don't see the French renaming the Gare Austerlitz to avoid upsetting the Germans.
The Royal Navy tweeted last night about HMS Achilles. It's the name being given to a new Astute-class submarine. The King has approved calling it after 5 other Navy vessels in history. But hang on, wasn't it going to be called HMS Agincourt? The Sun says woke Navy chiefs have changed the name to avoid annoying the French. Rear Admiral Dr. Chris Parry, former NATO commander, joins us now. Good morning to you, Chris.
Hello, Stig.
Can this be true? I mean, would the French be that bothered about HMS Agincourt?
Oh yeah, they're very worried about it. But the fact of life is, this is just craven and contemptible surrender to, I'm afraid, the ideology being pushed by our government. It seeks to erase our history and anything we need to be proud of. I don't see the French renaming the Gare Austerlitz to avoid upsetting the Germans. And I'm now concerned that we might lose Waterloo and Trafalgar Square.
Well, exactly right. I mean, this is a country built on history, as all countries are, and you commemorate your heroes and you commemorate your great victories. And has this happened before? Is this a modern thing, do you think?
Well, I think in this case, it's a particular case. We've had HMS Agincourt before. Oddly enough, HMS Agincourt during the First World War was a renamed Turkish ship. We built the ship for the Turks, and when the Turks decided to fight for the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians, we actually took it over, renamed it, and took part in the Battle of Jutland. It is very unusual to rename ships. In fact, it's considered unlucky. In this case, of course, Achilles, the Greek hero, was killed by the Trojan character Paris, which is a bit unfortunate, isn't it?
But also, why are we not worried about the Trojans? Like, but the Trojans might feel a bit sad about this.
Well, the Trojans, yeah, are going to feel very upset. But interestingly enough, one of my relatives in the Second World War was in command of the cruiser HMS Achilles, so it's a great name. But the fact of life is, this is just craven political correctness and ideology gone mad. And I've got no doubt that the admirals will be seething about this. You don't rename ships once they start getting built. And I'm afraid to say it's probably payback for the AUKUS deal, where, if you remember, the French were excluded from the submarine deal between Australia, America and the United Kingdom. I mean, it's unbelievable, to tell you the truth. And the excuse they're using to change it, it's the anniversary of VJ and VE Day, is probably the weakest communications excuse I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, why would that mean you change the name of a ship?
Unbelievable. I don't understand it. Somebody has got a bee in their bonnet in government, or some official or SPAD has decided that, well, let's erase one of our most famous victories in history. I mean, ironically, of course, you could actually give the two-fingered gesture that archers used to give to the French once they defeated them in relation to this.
Who makes this? How does this work then? Because the relationship between the military and the Ministry of Defence to outsiders is relatively hard to penetrate. I mean, because you'd like to think that the people who make decisions about what ships are called and how they work and all of that is done by admirals, people who run the Navy. Is that not the case?
Well, what it is, in fact, I used to belong to the committee that named ships. So it's called the Warship Naming Committee. They make recommendations to the Admiralty Board. They then obviously approve them. In the past, there hasn't been political interference in this sort of thing. Now, clearly, there is every aspect of our lives. But no admiral's going to resign over this. They value their careers too much.
And just finally going back to where we started, would the French be bothered about it? You sort of said very confidently yes. Is there evidence of that? Because I'm trying to think, is there an equivalent of a battle we've lost where our now allies have named something in that? Is there a British equivalent in reverse?
Well, I'm sure there is. I can't think of one right now. But let me tell you, one of the French submarines is called Redoutable, and that was the warship at Trafalgar from which Nelson was killed, of course. So, there's lots knocking around. I mean, we used to have a whole class of destroyers called the battle class, and most of those were victories against the French. I mean, oddly enough, when I was on the Warship Naming Committee, we actually said, why don't we have a battle class? In fact, the current destroyers were going to be the battle class, and we pointed out that, you know, most of them would be against the French, so that probably wouldn't be great.
Jim, who's an American, has suggested one here that I don't hear any Brits moaning about the USS Yorktown, which would have commemorated a defeat of the Brits. Yeah,
we don't mind. I mean, Yorktown, I mean, at the end of the day, was it was a score draw, really, but we lost on away goals. No, I mean, odd enough, I mean, Yorktown, we don't mind. I mean, for heaven's sake, we're friends with the Americans. You know, we do mind against the French, of course we do.
Can I ask you about this extraordinary story that the Royal Navy has renamed a submarine HMS Achilles rather than HMS Agincourt, perhaps for fear of offending the French?
Well, when I was serving and my successors were serving, we always knew it as Agincourt. That was going to be the last boat in the HMS Astute Hunter Killer submarine class. It was announced years ago. So to suddenly change it now, when the Navy is in the middle of a recruiting crisis, productivity problems, can't actually, has to give up its 2 landing assault craft because it didn't plan properly for the Type 26s, all of those to be faffing around by naming a submarine that, let's be honest, the French will have got used to the name about, 10 years ago. It's not a surprise. It sounds very, very bizarre. And, we're very close to the French. The French are one of our strongest allies. They don't get put off by names like that. I mean, this shows a very pathetic grasp of foreign policy and relationships.
I was going to ask you whether or not they'd ever complained to you during your tenure about that name.
No, not at all. I mean, I got on very close with the French. I used to see them regularly. Sébastien Lecornu is an excellent defence minister in Paris. They are and should be one of our main closest allies in Europe, and I think they are at the moment. No, they never complain about that. In fact, we talk about our shared history in a proud way. The French have a regimental system. They celebrate the successes, but they also know in their history they didn't have all the successes. But then again, Britain and France have had a sibling relationship for centuries. So if that is the actual reason it's been renamed, then I would be concerned that it shows we're focusing on superficial nonsense rather than rebuilding our defence.
Not to mention tempting fate with that name Achilles and its heel, perhaps. But can I also ask you finally about an extraordinary story in the Times today with quite a remarkable top line that you have to read again and again. Are you worried about the youth of today, given that we have this survey that we read about that shows that between 13 and 27, those age that suggest that more than half think a strong leader would be better than regular elections, i.e. they would fancy a dictator?
Well, I think we should always be concerned if that is the general drift of things. I mean, look, the Russians spend their life telling themselves that they're ridiculously dangerous and aggressive leaders are okay because they're strong, while so many Russians themselves live in poverty, and they fail to capitalize on their economic potential because they say, oh, well, he's a strong leader. Strong leaders aren't the answer to everything. Ultimately, a good democracy and transparency and a free press and an independent judiciary are what makes us strong. And we need to make sure we encourage quality people to become politicians. That's the simple reality. And I do worry that in this day and age, we are, the sector of politics is less attractive to successful people because, of everything from social media, hate, attacks on them, and indeed, an expectation that people can just fix everything instantly. It's a very tricky career to go into today's world, and I think it's getting worse, and therefore that's reflected in the type of quality politicians we have. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a cabinet so weak. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer hardly spring out of us thinking, God, what a talented bunch of people. As Rachel Reeves talked down the economy and crashed it, basically, and Keir Starmer can't even raise British national interest for the American president. I mean, that's where we're getting to in politics. It's not answered by a strong leader, it's answered by quality politicians.
Ben Wallace, former Defence Secretary, thank you very much for joining us. And James Cartledge, the Shadow Defence Secretary, has an urgent question on this topic later today in Parliament on defence spending. We'll keep you updated on that.